Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. It is that time again. I know we're feeling good. I know we got the season off to a good start. Happy, but the beat rolls on. We have another game coming up this Sunday. And if you want to turn that win into something maybe even bigger than just one win, you got to keep building on it. And that starts in Santa Clara. And we're going to talk about it tonight with Brandon of the Hawks Nest. Brandon, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. It's victory week, Brendan. Every day is just a little bit sweeter during victory week. If you got to get up a little bit earlier, it's okay. I can get up earlier this week. Got to work a little bit longer. It's okay. My Hawks won. I got to work a little bit longer this week. It's quite a difference for me when my Hawks get a dub versus a loss.
I don't have a chair right now. My chair's been moved out because I'm getting a new one. So for 2 days, I don't have a chair. My room looks so weird, but it's okay because the Hawks won.
That's it. It's the ultimate salve. Yeah.
Right. So that being said, you can only take so long to bask in it before you move on to the next game. And we do have another game coming up here. We are playing the San Francisco 49ers again in Santa Clara. And we got some stuff to talk about with this one. The Niners got off to a bad start to their season, punting away one of their few gimmies, playing in a monsoon that I think had a significant role in that game getting flipped the way that it did. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right in talking about these 49ers. Couple of roster notes from this week before we get into that. Jamal Adams was officially placed on injured reserve. He is out for the year. Tanner Muse has been promoted, presumably to at least partially replace him. And just real quick, what do you think of Tanner Muse?
He's undersized. He looks very light out there for the position. He moves really well. He's got good quickness, athleticism that popped out in the preseason, but I didn't see anything as far as above average instincts or next level instincts that made me think that he's somebody that could even push a guy like Cody Barton. He held up okay in the preseason. I thought he was at his best in that Cowboy game. Before that, I thought he's part of those guys that had, I think if you look at the missed tackles in preseason, he probably had about 3 or 4 of those suckers, if not a few more. So that's where, again, that size part comes down to. It's like, well, you can move, but once you arrive there, can you tackle like a linebacker? Can you actually bring the guy to the ground?
So you don't see him having a big role going forward with this defense with Jamal out, because I think part of it is you were planning on using Jamal as a linebacker sometimes, and now you can't.
Yeah, I think probably Cody Barton or Jordan Brooks takes those snaps, and then you just have him as a backup now, thinking there's going to be more stress on those guys. That's, maybe if you were thinking with Cody Barton, there would be times where 8% of his snaps, he comes off the field for Jamal Adams to slide into his role there, into the spot on that field. That now that's gone, that's that 8% more on that's going to be taxed on them with the extra game this season. So you're going to want to reinforce the ranks if that's probably the case. You're right. It's probably an adjustment thing, but just an adjustment thing and just to a different degree, in my opinion.
Right. So that was the main move. We actually picked up a couple of former Sean Desai guys as well. Christian Jones, linebacker, joined the practice squad, and Tease Tabor has joined the defensive backfield. Both guys who played for the Bears last year. Christian Jones actually had a pretty long and accomplished NFL career for a practice squatter, so I thought that was interesting. Do you have any thoughts on him at all?
I know a tiny bit about Tabor being I think he's a Florida guy, and he came out and he was pretty athletic. Another one of these Florida guys that's just quick and athletic and, a lot of tantalizing physical abilities, but not necessarily able to fully kind of put it together, or as of yet hasn't really ever fully putting it together. But admittedly, I've probably watched him a casual eye. It was more probably just me when I was looking at him coming out of college than it is, where I see him now or what I've been tracking him as now.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that name. It's a very distinctive name.
So it is.
Like, I think I remember him in the draft or something, because you don't forget a name like that. But yeah, just a little bit of roster churn, which makes sense with the Jamal Adams stuff, which I think we all expected it, but today it was made official. Tragic,
I think those guys fill in too. Those guys are going to be back end guys where if you're getting to the point of needing to use them, I think Seattle at that point is looking into a trade situation this early into the season. I think right now those guys are brought in to give you some reinforcements. But if you truly had to come down to counting to either of those two guys on the football field, it probably means John Schneider's pulling a trade on one of those two positions.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say I've always kind of been into the Tanner Muse thing because I look at a guy who was a top 100 pick, and then the team that drafted him let him go because of reasons that didn't really have to do with what he could do on a football field. It was because of something in that organization. They just wanted to clear stuff out.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's getting the Schneider, the Gruden problems or the Gruden picks gone, and he's got the quickness and speed element is something you can't teach. And he hasn't gotten really a true opportunity. I mean, preseason was a little bit of a limited snaps on either end of it. So, I can't say I know for certain what he is at this point. We know he's got some tantalizing athletic gifts, but you don't really know where they're at, because we'd have to kind of see him play, I think. But I am where he looked small to me, just a tiny bit small to me on the field in that preseason for a linebacker.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. I kind of liked him more as a safety, which I mean, one or two guys go down and he may be up. It could end up being the role that he plays in this defense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you never know, man. Maybe they've got a sub package for him, that they can figure out.
Right.
That'd be interesting.
Okay, so that's where our team sits going into this 49ers game. So let's talk about the San Francisco team for a little bit here. Let's start with the offense. And I'll tell you, they've got some problems on that side of the ball. They've got some real problems. Let's start with Trey Lance here. He's the guy that everyone's watching because he's the make or break guy. So we both like Trey Lance, but he's a 21-year-old kid. What is he not doing right now that he's going to need to do to become an actual good NFL quarterback? Where does he lack?
Well, he certainly is raw in every way. I mean, he hasn't played a lot of quarterback. He is just every way you could imagine him being green. He's green, from footwork to decision making to competency at the line of scrimmage. Josh Allen, when he was 22 years old, was throwing for 53% in this league. He wasn't Josh Allen of right now. Patrick Mahomes, when he was 22 years old, was doing what? That's right, sitting on a bench behind Alex Smith. So when you really look at Trey Lance, if you want to get to the bottom line of it, is the greenery is not to be expected. It is. You knew you were going to get this with this kid. We all thought we were. I said we were for 2 years with this. I said, if you draft him, you just got to give him a little bit of time. He's not going to be ready. He's 21 years old, being taken out of college after he didn't play the whole previous year. So he just hasn't had enough seasoning, Brendan. He just hasn't had enough time to get out there and get his feet wet to really understand what's going on. And I was on a 49er channel last night, and they are like, damn the torpedoes as far as Lance. They are definitely in some panic mode there on that side of it to a degree, which I thought was kind of interesting. Like, you guys, you can give him at least a chance. I don't know if it's Garoppolo's presence sitting behind him, but there was definitely a high amount of flamage as far as kind of looking at Lance's performance this first week and what we've gone last year and going, we don't see it. I go again, it'll come there. It just might take more than 2 years. From our benefit on this, I think he's going to be a monster at some point, but it might take him a little bit of time. He's a really young guy and he hasn't played a lot of football. And now the Niners are going to go through the ups and downs of that with him through this whole starting experience. And we're trying to do the same thing with the next quarterback we bring in. But Brendan, this is why I harp on pro ready, right? That's in my assessment of the quarterback I want. I say this, it matters. Context matters. What you want for this offense matters. You want the pro ready guy, not the Trey Lance guy, not the guy that's going to take 3 years of his rookie deal to finally give you those returns. And then he wants a contract extension that blows the whole blueprint out the water when we're trying to replicate 2012. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but I don't think you can take.
We got to go long-winded, man.
Yeah,
it's Trey Lance.
It's Trey Lance, man. There's a lot to these corners. But last week you mentioned the monsoon. You can't take anything from last week with his play, not in my opinion. The conditions there were awful. He had no Kittle in that game. It leveled the playing field. I watched the whole game. That rain leveled the playing field. Didn't matter if you're a little more quicker or you're a little more, athletic here. Everybody was like doing that tap dance thing that they do in the rain where they're just beep, 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 trying to get their feet down to slow down and stop at times. So I don't take too much away from him in his performance last week. This Niner offense, you're right, though, does have some concerns and problems. That doesn't mean that isn't the case. And at the head of that is, though I like Lance down the road, I'm not so sure he's fully all good to go here, that everything that it's just a matter of a couple games for him to kind of figure his way through here. And then you're going to get your Mahomes-like elevation at that point in time.
Yeah. Do you buy the theory that Shanahan wanted Mac Jones, but John Lynch forced Trey Lance to be the pick?
Kind of.
Hmm.
Yeah, I kind of do because of the fact that it there was so much heat behind them wanting Mac Jones, and there was no reason for that to be a smokescreen on their part. Nobody was going to trade up to go get Mac Jones because Niners liked him now that they had traded up to number 3 in the draft. Nobody was going to do that. Maybe some wish they made. The reason it was leaking out, I think, was because Shanahan was like, "This is who I want. Let him know. Let's prepare everybody for this being our pick. Let's set this down." And then they started getting some people like, out there starting to laugh at him for making that selection at number 3. Like, you could get that guy at 15. You trade up 3 picks to go get him at 3. And I think a little bit of that turned in that process as you led in the draft there. And I think, yeah, Lynch probably was at the head of that then going, look, people are not going to, we're going to get pitchforked on this one. We cannot make this choice. And, frankly,
Yeah.
where Mac Jones went at 15, for you to take 3 first-round picks and take him at 3 at that point, even if you loved him to death, that's going to be a tough sell to the crowd fan base unless he's getting you Super Bowls there out the year 1, 2, or 3.
I mean, you have to wonder though, because this Niners team is ready now. If they had gotten
Yeah.
a quarterback who was ready now, watch out, right? Like even a Mac Jones who is not a great quarterback, would Mac Jones have been able to get to the Super Bowl last year with the 49ers instead of Trey?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, we could debate this one, right? Because we would go, is he better than Garoppolo? I mean, that's really not the question of Trey at that point, because we know Trey's not good enough to overcome Garoppolo last year in his development, being as young as he
Mhm.
was. But would Mac Jones be enough more? When Garoppolo couldn't get you any points in that first half of the Packer game on the road in the playoffs, could have Mac pulled that off? And that was a little bit of debate I had last night. Is like, maybe you could sell me on the argument that maybe Mac Jones gets you, like, even in his early years, 5-6% further along than Garoppolo. And hey, is 5 or 6% could be that Super Bowl throw that Garoppolo missed a couple of years ago, right? It could be that little bit of a difference to push this team up over the top for him. But we'll know someday. It will
Mhm.
come out. I do. Do you think?
It makes too much sense. I think it is probably what happened.
Yeah.
If you look at the quarterbacks that Shanahan likes, they're the guys who stay on target. They're not the guys who do crazy improvisey stuff. They're the guys who just execute the play. Matt
Yeah.
Ryan, Kirk Cousins, not the Trey Lance types.
That's right. Garoppolo. I mean, they traded a second round pick to bring in Garoppolo. That was a guy that he definitely tapped and said, yeah, I want that skill set. So that's, again, to your point on that. But they're riding as a Super Bowl team in a Super Bowl window. They played that one a little bit weird considering where the rest of the team was.
Right. Okay, so that's the quarterback. Now we got to parse through all the issues they're having elsewhere because they got issues all over the place here. Let's start with the running back room because that's probably the biggest and most obvious issue. Elijah Mitchell's gone for, I think, 2 months or something like that. He's going to be gone a while, definitely not playing in this game. And everybody I've spoken to says that Jeff Wilson Jr. he doesn't have it anymore. He's not good anymore. So you've got Tyrion Davis Price, who I think is a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
You have Marlon Mack, who they just signed to their practice squad and seems to pretty clearly have very little left if nobody's picking him up.
Mm.
And you also have a Seahawks team, by the way, that showed vulnerability to the outside zone runs against the Broncos.
Bingo.
So how are the 49ers going to find a way to take advantage with this running back room?
Well, and that's you touch on the key of that here, right? Is that, yes, the running game is, to me, the part of the running game for the Niners that I'm most worried about is indeed that outside zone stuff. I think the interior of their line, which we'll talk about in a second, has some question marks. So this has been something the Niners have done a good job of in recent history, is really that outside zone run, especially. And they've done it on the back of not great running backs, but running backs with like Liam Neeson with a certain set of skills. Like, these are guys that are fast. Matt Breida, Mozart, Elijah Mitchell. Okay. So it's not that he's been able to get by with lesser running backs in a quote unquote standpoint, but it's not lesser running backs that don't have something that works with what he wants to do offensively, which is, if you're going to run outside zone, you've got to have a running back with the wheels to get out there. Because if he takes a long time, the defense is just going to flow to him and eat the whole thing up, and it'll never get anywhere. So do they now have that guy here at the speed point that can give them that same kind of matchstick point now that they're going this deep to the depth chart? I watched a little bit. He was on the back end of the running back prospects. I don't know if you took a look at him, but the hyphenated kid that they've got going, he's kind of a little more of a power guy. Good burst.
I didn't really scout him. No,
he's kind of he's a short burst power guy, like low built frame to the ground kind of guy. I didn't see as much speed from him in the LSU. Then I didn't watch a lot because that was like, you're getting to the deep in the running backs. And I'm like, I liked his tape, but they are down. The weird thing with them too, Brendan, is Trey Sermon. They drafted, I believe, Trey Sermon in the 3rd round last year, a guy who a lot of people in my chat were loving it with him coming out of Ohio State. And he looked very much like a San Francisco running back. Heard good news coming out of him in training camp this year. Cut him at the end of training camp. Obviously, the light bulb just didn't go on for him. But you talk about that running back room being further pulled down, Brendan, beyond that, off of where it was, considering you removed Trey Sermon out of that too. Act like that's almost an injury, because that was in the long-term plans this offseason that Trey Sermon was going to fit somewhere along in this depth chart. He's out of there as well.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I saw this tweet, I think it was last week, maybe a couple weeks ago, that was like listing all the running backs the Niners have had since Shanahan got there. And all the ones who had success were UDFAs, and the ones that failed were guys they actually either spent big money on or were highly drafted. Like, who's the guy they brought in from Atlanta? Coleman?
Tevin Coleman.
Tevin Coleman, yeah, they gave him money and he never did anything for him. Sermon is another one, whereas random guys like Mostert and Elijah Mitchell are the ones who have success. So the lesson is, I guess, stop giving running backs money.
He'll never do it though, because let's go back to his track record. Washington Redskins at the time, Alfred Morris had some big years there when Shanahan was there. 6th, 7th round guy, right? Then undrafted rookie free agent. Go back to the Broncos with his father there. Guys with the name of like Orlandis Gary. Terrell Davis, as good as he was I believe a 6th round pick out of Georgia.
Round, yeah.
And if you look through the Broncos through those years, it was one after another where they were just they would replace him year after year. And even when they had a really good one that they drafted, they ended up flipping him out for Champ Bailey to bring him in there. So he's always, it's weird. Shanahan, going back those years, always has the love-hate relationship with the running backs. Like, I love you. No, I don't. Yes, I do. No, I don't. It's like he's very goes back and forth a little bit because he loves to run and he loves having these backs that can do this stuff. But then at the same point in time, they seem to be able to get into his doghouse very quickly. You mentioned Tevin Coleman. You're right. Could never get on the field. Despite the fact they gave him the money that they did. I think there was another back that they had paid too, and I'm forgetting. It wasn't a big deal, but gave him a little bit of money at least, and it was the same thing where it just didn't end up using him.
So are we kind of dodging the bullet here with a defense that can't stop the outside zone, but we're playing a team that would love to run it but can't? Do you think we're kind of dodging it?
We've discussed that 4-man front, and that's the thing that's worrying me right now is the formations of this 4-man front we're running might be so weird and wonky as to they can still make some hay against our defensive front if they run that again. I'm okay. You want to go 3-4, Brendan, but this 4-man front thing with the 2 outside linebackers and the 2 1 techs on the inside, I'm not here for that necessarily. Like if it's just a Russell Wilson wrinkle from the last week, so be it. Great job, guys. You're changing scheme week to week. You're brilliant. If it's, we're going to try to run this as our now we're creating a new defense. I'm going to be less probably as interested in watching that again, because I think he's going to have his way with it. Those lanes are too wide, Brendan, between that outside linebacker and the quote unquote 1 techs on the inside there. That's just too much space. And a team that is the team that wants to run the ball against that front, like Shanahan, I mean, he's going to be slobbering and drooling and frothing when he sees him run those kind of fronts. In fact, I bet he's telling Trey Lance this week, we come to line of scrimmage and you see that 4-man front, you're running an outside zone every time to their weak side player at Darrell Taylor's side, which is what Broncos, I went back and watched the All-22. That's what the Broncos did. They stayed away from Achuna and they attacked all day long Taylor on his side and outside run. It was his outside that they were going after every single time. So
yeah, I picked that up too.
Yeah. So they're going to keep going at it there. And that's what I would tell Trey to do that every single time if I saw that. Make me prove that 1 tech can get all the way out there with a double team at his face on pin blocks to get back to that outside, and then hope your linebackers can get down with one of those other guards coming downhill, taking out one of the other linebackers. You end up man on man and hoping your safeties are coming down fast enough to keep the play down to a tempered level as far as, 6, 7 yards instead of 13, 14, 15 yards.
Real quick here, we got some super chats. The snail, thank you for the $5. Lance is Kaepernick with a bit more arm, only reads half the field, and can run good. Um, there's some merit to the comparison.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay. I made that same comparison about him coming out, but I said that the difference here is that his delivery and the way the ball comes out of his hand is so much smoother than Kaepernick. Remember with Kaepernick, it was this long arching throw that would then eventually come around to be tossed. So corners could jump on the ball as that elongated motion would come around. Lance has got much more of a compact motion, much better deep ball, much more ability to the throw with a little more layering. Where Kaepernick, everything was a piss missile up the field every time that it came out of his hands. And so there is certainly the mobility stuff, the long striding stuff of Kaepernick is very much Trey Lance. They're very similar. They're not the Lamar Jackson types, right? It's more of the Randall Cunningham, get up to speed. And oh my God, look out, and they're kind of big. So they're not easy to bring down either as well, but there's some shades there.
Trey
What do you
Lance
think?
big? Is Trey Lance that big? I thought Trey
Six
Lance was
four.
really okay. He looks
Yeah.
smaller to me for some reason. I don't know what that is. Okay.
He carries weight
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I'll say that's a pretty good comp. I think he'll probably be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm talking about like the Kaepernick who was good for like a year and a half or whatever it was. Like, I think Trey will be better than that. I like Trey, but it's going to take time. And not every team's going to have that time. The Niners fans sure don't have that time. I mean, if you listen to them,
They were freaking out last night, Brendan. I was there. Was like, the host was like, "See, are you listening to the Seahawks fan telling you guys to chill out?" It was kind of funny because he's like, "I've been telling them this, and they're not listening to me." And I'm like, "I feel you, man. I know sometimes people get, but hey, like I said to him too, I get where they're coming from because you're in that. I've told you about those 4 tiers. I think you're in. Niners are in that elite tier. They're competing for it right now, and you've got this quarterback you're waiting on the development of. And you're like, the clock's ticking here. The clock's ticking. They're also upset that they're not going for it as much compared to what the Rams did. They look at it as a lot more of the organization taking a very, like Hawks would used to do with the 2-3 year plan approach thing. And we're not going to overstretch ourselves in one given year to really, really go over the top for it.
I mean, they really shouldn't be overextending themselves in a year where they have a 21-year-old starting quarterback. That's probably just a bad practice.
That's where to me we come back to like, was getting a young quarterback that young when you're in your prime. That's to me more of the key of whether or not Lance is the right guy or not in the long term as being a good guy. But was it the right choice for where you were with your team at that time? And I think it's an important question because we got to ask ourselves the very same thing a year from now. We're going to be in a very similar, not in the same, maybe they were as when they drafted Lance, they had been to a Super Bowl. So like just within the last 2 years, so it's a little different, but that we're in the situation of making the right choice of the quarterback, not just based on how talented he is, how much he can tilt a field, but how much he can be good immediately and fit within the game manager role that we're going to want to fit him into. And that's really why that's the most important question. Because Brendan, you get it wrong down the lane, like we're talking about them potentially here getting it wrong, not because Trey Lance is bad, but he may become good right as they're leaving their window. Their window might be just coming to a shut just as he's getting awesome and just as they're about to have to pay him. And that's the avoidance here thing for me. That's where it's like, if the Seahawks front office is smart, they've got to watch this kind of situation and take some notes from it and understanding, okay, you've got to understand your timing. You got to understand your team. You've got to understand everything. It's not just making the decision in the vacuum of he's got a great arm and he's like, unless he's a generational talent that just don't matter on, and you got it. And Lance wasn't that. I didn't have him as a generational talent. I had him as like a Kaepernick with a bit better arm, quicker delivery, more upside to him. But I think that's the role. What do you think? Are you in that lane too, as far as that next guy, or have you made a decision on that yet on what you would lean towards?
I mean, I like Trey Lance, but I think when you look at what the situation the Niners are in right now, they should have gotten somebody, maybe even Justin Fields. Maybe it should have been Fields. He was the guy who was more ready than Lance.
I agree on that. Yeah,
Yes.
I think he would have been a little bit more quicker along the line than Lance. I think Lance has got some upside over Fields a little bit by a smidge, and I'm just not a big Fields guy, but you're right. I think Fields would have been able to come in there and at least give them a little bit better play. First, the question mark they have right now, a little more immediate. What about for our Hawks? Have you looked at that upcoming situation from your standpoint?
Oh yeah, I want the NFL ready guy, 100%.
Okay.
I want the. I mean, I wouldn't be against getting the high potential guy, but it just narrows your window down so much. You might really only have a 1-year window of having that cheap Super Bowl caliber quarterback opposed to a 3-year window.
Right. Right. Which again is, if that's a path you take, then you don't necessarily fit to the way we've put this blueprint together. I mean, that's more of a pathway to me you put towards, okay, let's get a more of a super offense kind of get to go. So he's really made to look good as fast as possible because he's got so much to work with, a great line blocking up front and playmakers and a running back, all that stuff. And I do think you just gotta, it's a key point of this, because the Niners could look back on this and say, man, we went in the wrong direction on this with whoever we select. Not the bad on the guy, the player was good, just our timing was crap. And the half field read, 22-year-old kid's going to have a half field read. No 22 NFL court. There's not a 22-year-old NFL quarterback that's playing in this sport that isn't giving you a half field read, in my opinion.
Chase Stern, thank you for the $5. Wouldn't it be hilarious if the Seahawks started out 4-0, considering the media's takes on us? Yeah, hilarious is one way to put it, I think. I don't want to sleep on those next two games, because I know if we win this game against the Niners, then Seahawks fans are going to kind of have their chest puffed out, and they might sleep a little bit on these next two teams, because it's like, oh, it's the Falcons and Lions. So
yeah,
don't get ahead of yourselves here, but it's on the table.
Yeah, it's going to be this week. This year, as much as any year, it's beyond the cliche of Carol's take it 1 week at a time. I'm, from my standpoint, taking every week one at a time. There are no guarantees on the schedule for me, even that Jets game later on in the year. You do have a potential to get yourself out to a 4-0 start. Then at that point, you've done a really great job to do so. If you've gotten through there to get there. This is gonna be a tough game though this week. There's gonna be a dogfight. It always is between interdivision games, and interdimensional games, both of those. So it is a little too early on the 4-0, but if it is, it would be fun to watch the media kind of turn over themselves. As much as I'll enjoy that, Brendan, though, I will be more just like, well, you don't really get that point to 4-0 at luck at that point, in my opinion. It's not just a one game off. Now we really do have a little more firm certainty of, as I've said, my thing we're both kind of watching for is, are we in good hands here? Is the future as it goes forward in the right hands? And that would definitely start to give you just more and more. I would be more happy with that, knowing that, okay, I can start to put a little more trust bit by bit here into these guys and what they're doing here.
Yeah. I mean, if this team's able to have a good season, or, go 4-0 or whatever, with a $3 million quarterback starting, then you got to feel like the future's really, really bright. And some people are worried, oh, we're going to lose our, top draft pick, but it's a good problem to have. It really is.
Oh, it's awesome. This again, that's why I didn't like tanking. You kept the winning culture involved. You've got the players now next year buying in, because they're like, look what we did with Russ and Bobby gone, and with them just restocking these young rookies and all. Imagine what we're going to do now a year forward. You're going to have those guys hyped and ready to go. So I think it's just a better approach. I get why people want that high pick, but I think this will be in the long term the better approach.
So the rest of the Niners offense, wide receivers, they're actually fairly good at. They still got Debo. They still got Brandon Ayuk. I will say, though, after those two guys, I'm looking at their depth chart right here. I got Jawan Jennings, Ray McLeod III, and Danny Gray. Not a whole lot. It's a shallow receiver core, isn't it?
Very shallow. Yeah. They do run a lot of their 2 tight end stuff. They're not as much of the Rams 3-4 stuff that they run a lot of. So they don't tend to need a lot of guys with that. Gray's the interesting one out of SMU. He was a fun player to scout coming out. Again, not a guy that I had, I think, very high up on my deal, but a guy that there was some physical potential there versus the other guys you mentioned, who I think we've seen a couple times, or I know we've seen Ray. That they haven't done a whole lot for them. So they're definitely, not as deep behind them. And, but the front two are pretty good. Ayuk is a guy where he's been in and out of the doghouse, like the running back situation with Shanahan, back and forth. Can't seem to get in that offense. But he's a guy I think still has a lot of potential to his game. He's got a huge catch radius, runs really good routes, good overall hands, really athletic, but they haven't utilized him a whole bunch. But he's fairly dangerous out there on the outside. I think he's going to they're probably going to match him up with Tariq, and he might give Tariq some issues there with that route running. He's going to really challenge Tariq at that point.
Right. And good luck running 2 tight end sets if you don't have your number 1 tight end, because George Kittle did not practice today. It's looking to me like they're saying it's going to rain, which is also going to impact the decision on whether or not he plays. Mm-hmm. I don't think he plays. I don't think Kittle plays. So You've got Tyler Croft, who's had a pretty long NFL career, but he's had one season where he put up significant numbers. Ross Dwelly and Charlie Warner. So if the Niners don't have a lot of depth at receiver and they're missing their all-world tight end, how are they? What do they got? I mean, do you see much of any way out of it in terms of pass catchers with no Kittle?
I mean, they're gonna have to commit. This is where it comes down to: do you commit to wanting to just run a lot of stuff with Trey Lance and doing a bunch of read option stuff, where you generate Lance with ending up the game with kind of like Jalen Hurts doing with the Eagles right now, where you watch the box chart at the end of the day with Hurts and the Eagles, and he's coming away with 10, 11 carries like almost every game. So they're
Right.
obviously going, okay, we commit to letting this guy go. If they do that, that becomes dangerous for us. Just from the standpoint of it's going to challenge you there. It's the one extra defender, one that's got to go get him. And he's a tough guy to bring down that if they're committed to it, where they're not, we got to, as opposed to them saying, let's keep him safe. Let's have minimized those amount of read option looks that we give him in that respect. Also going to get probably a heavy dose of Debo, who has given our Seahawks team problems at times. And so that's going to be challenging that secondary to tackle. I was impressed by those corners last week, doing a good job. Linebackers doing a pretty good job on Javonte Williams. He had good runs, but it was always usually they were just on the runs on the pitch plays where he's untouched. Then when he finally is touched, he's tackled. Or, when there was a guy who finally got their hands on him, they would bring him down for the most part. So I'm looking at them trying to do that. They don't have as much to work through, man. Kittle's a big part of their offense, and not having the running backs that were at least a fast running back there that legitimately is, more embedded in what they've done. He's gotten by on them before, I know, but I think this is a little bit of one that Trey Sermon thing factors into me on. I look at it all and I go, he's pulling that as far as he can on that. I can throw any running back there and make him successful thing. Plus, let's not forget, tackles are good. Interior of that 49er line's got some big question marks. Alex Mack retired. Laken Tomlinson signed a free agent deal with the New York Jets. And I think there are other ones even in flux. I think they got that Brooks kid who I hated his Notre Dame tape, Brendan. Hated his Notre Dame tape. So we'll see what they've got there on the line outside of that. Also, the right tackle's a little beat up too. He's got some nagging injuries going on.
Yeah, I was just going to turn the page to that, the offensive line. So they've got their tackles. Trent Williams, one of the best in the business. McGlinchey's okay. But the interior of the line, let's run this down here real quick. So left guard is Aaron Banks. Is he the Notre Dame?
That's it. Banks, yeah. That's the one. Thanks, sorry, Brooks Banks.
Yeah. Daniel Brunskill is not practicing, unlikely to play. He was their starting right guard last year. So far this year, they've had a Spencer Burford, who I think was
I thought Lincoln Tomlinson was their guard last year.
No. Wait, left guard or right guard?
I thought Tomlinson's a right guard.
Okay, because I looked at the PFR before this stream, and Daniel Brunskill played over 1,000 snaps for the Niners on offense last year. Maybe he was
left
playing...
guard.
Yeah, okay.
He was probably left guard.
Right. So Brunskill's probably out, meaning they've got Banks and Burford starting at guard right now, and then Jake Brendel starting on the inside. So it's kind of unfortunate we're not going to have Shelby Harris because this is probably not going to have Shelby Harris because this is a pretty soft interior offensive line, isn't it?
Is it LJ time?
No, it's got to be Miles Adams before LJ Collier, man.
Come on,
Adams,
get Miles out there. Yeah, I don't need no LJ. Right. Sorry, I had to. Say that again. What was the question again?
Anyway, no. The interior of that offensive line is just so weak looking to me, especially if Brunskill's out.
Yeah.
So, do you think our defensive line, which played okay against the Broncos, what are you seeing from them, especially if we don't have Shelby Harris, which would be a real tragedy in a game like this?
Well, I would love for this to be a game, Brendan, that you walk out and you say, you guys want to see hybridization this year? Check this out. And they just run 4-3 Sam all day long. 4-3 Sam all day long. 4-3 under from last year, because that's part of why we had so much success against the Niners over the last few years, as opposed to the Rams, who would run, of course, their 3-4, and they'd have the 4-eye technique, right, where their defensive ends are about a half yard inside the shoulder of the tackles, giving the tackles natural leverage to the outside. And that's why you see the 49ers wide zone game work so well against the Rams. Well, we've just adopted the cover 2 shell defense this last offseason. So we've adopted that Ram defense to theoretically, if we're running through some 3-4, put our defensive ends in that position of that 4-eye technique to, like it happens with the Rams, then put us in a bit of a vulnerability and a weakness to the outside zone, which is the bread and butter of Shanahan. So I advocate for this week. You still have the 4-3 personnel, still got the guys to do it. Throw Darrell Taylor out there at the Sam, rock your 4-3 defense in this game, and force the Niners to have to pass, clog some things up in the lane. That's what having that Sam linebacker there serves as a de facto fifth defensive lineman. Stop the 49ers in the run game. Force them to pass. Force them to beat you with the pass. And if they do, and if Lance does, then so be it. But you're forcing them to go to their weakness at that point, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see a lot of weaknesses on this offense we could exploit, because when I was first thinking about this game, and this is about where we're about to go to, I was thinking to myself, how do we score? But really, it's also, how are the Niners going to score with all these issues they've got? The middle of the offensive line is a mess. No Kittle. Thin receiver depth, thin running back depth, the quarterback who is, still probably got acne, I'm sure. He's 21 years old.
He's only got like 3 whiskers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's still got spots. So I could see this being a very low scoring game that just kind of comes down to who gets a lucky break at the end. It could be like maybe even like a 9-6 type game, just kicking field goals the whole day.
It definitely has that potential to do so, because I think you're not going to get the Niners just coming out there laying over. They've been a little bit embarrassed nationally off that Bear game where everybody's going, oh man, what happened? The Niners got beat by the Bears. Oh my God. And so there's a little bit of that. The NFL works that way, where you get the slingshot situation going on, and you're going to get the team's best effort that the week after a bad loss like that, even though it wasn't really the Niners' fault. It's the way the national perspectives worked off the back of that game, and they've been hearing it all week in their ear chirping, and the coaches have been like, oh, you let the Bears beat your butt? All right. So I think you're going to get them playing with their hair on fire, and at home opener, we're going to have to contend with that. But I could see it be a low scoring game, to your point. I could see things getting held down below 20 points for both teams when it was all said and done.
They're losing week 3, so they have to win this game.
What's their week 3?
They're going to Denver, and we all know what Denver does with their home games in September. They don't lose them pretty much ever. They could be terrible, and they're still winning those games.
Because everybody's out of breath, man. Everybody's running around. They're like, this mile high air is like insane.
Yeah. Pete Carroll's first year as the Seahawks coach, we went in there. They had Kyle Orton, and they killed us.
Yeah,
that was a team that ended up going 4-12 and drafting Von Miller. So you just don't go into Mile High in September and win. So if you're the 49ers, you have to be looking at this as a situation where if we lose to the Seahawks, we're going 0-3, and the season's kind of already a wreck.
Bring out the Garoppolo.
Pretty much.
How fast do you think they go to Garoppolo? If you think by week 4 at that point, if they go 0-3?
They might. Yeah, I don't think Shanahan has any concerns about his job, but would he start to feel a little bit of pressure if it looks like they're going to throw away a season on the kid?
Well, I mean, you do have to wonder on that. And everybody said they were keeping Garoppolo in part to keep him away from us, but maybe in part was also for the insurance policy they knew they were probably going to need. There's fires all around us. Let's keep this, hazard insurance just in case.
The Snail, thank you for the $5 yet again. If Geno plays like he did all year, would you try to use your firsts on defensive difference makers and try for a project like Ward in the second? Well, I might be willing to do that regardless if I like a certain quarterback enough. Geno, it might not even be a matter of Geno. It might be a matter of wow, I can get crazy good value on these defensive players here, and there are going to be quarterbacks I like available later. So let's do it. I'm open to it.
I'm open to it somewhat. I'm really in a BPA best player available Snail position where I stand. So it's like, let the draft kind of fall to you. And then when we talk about retaining Geno beyond this year, what's that price tag going to be? Geno potentially makes $7 million this year. Are we talking about paying Geno Smith $20 million a year? Are we talking about paying Geno Smith $30 million a year? That's where we're starting to get in that place where I go, I don't know if I want to do that. Now, we don't have to necessarily go for a quarterback in the first round though either. So your Ward, comp, you have 2 second-round picks, and this draft's going to be filled to the brim with quarterbacks, not just first round, but throughout. So if you want to wait a little bit longer, and if you determine there's a pro-ready guy to be had in the second or third round, you can go grab him there. And if it's 2 defensive players that are best to go, I would like to, Brendan, I got to be honest, I like more of the idea of if you found like a left guard and a center, if you're really going to go like crazy to one edge of it, like let's just build up the super line then at that point, rather than getting two more defensive players, which I wouldn't hate to, but just I at least split it, at that point if you can, but if it's again BPA, if they're defining defensive players that Carroll's like, I haven't seen in these kind of guys available since 72. All right, throw another shrimp on the Barbie and let's roll.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be clear. Probably not. I'm open to the idea because there are going to be quarterbacks I like later. But realistically, there's going to be somebody there at one of our picks that I like way too much to pass up on for a defensive tackle, right? Like,
Right.
I just don't want to completely shut down any possibility that I think makes the team better.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's why it's hard to predict on this because it's going to be so unique and it's got so many different potential variations from where we could be picking to the players that'll be available. And we don't know how to align. We kind of need to see the specifics of which guy we're talking about passing or selecting, like we do with Will Anderson, who's kind of our de facto on that because it's one of the few early guys that we've got an eye on yet so far. So
right.
A little more time to get the picture a little clearer will help us to be able to answer that question probably a little more accurately.
283-128. Thank you for the $1.99. Adam Rank has the 49ers scoring 40 points in the entire month of September.
Wow. Rank's got him going, I guess. 40 points is all right.
I'm not saying they're going to win, but Trey Lance is not scoring 40 points on anybody. He's not ready.
How is there going to be enough possessions in this game to score 40 points? Both these teams are going to run the ball ad nauseum. Like you're going to have the clock ground down into a little bit of dust. Like it's going to be a 2.5 hour game. You get to 40 points and whatnot. You have two teams that are throwing the ball and slinging the rock all over the football field. So that's silly.
Yeah. It would have to be like we would have to like fumble the kickoff 4 times and then they'd return all the kickoffs for or something like that.
Pick 6. I mean, yeah. Or we get down by 3 touchdowns and we just bail on the running game. If it just fits the type, though, both these teams are going to try to run the ball. I mean, Niners aren't going to try to have Lance throwing 35 times in this game. Same thing is going to be true. Unless like last week, Brendan, we were 70-30 on the split with our pass to run. So maybe they're just.
Yeah. Did you see we were 6th in pass rate above expected?
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. The Dolphins were number 1, which was interesting. And shout out to Mike McDaniel. I think he's going to be a good coach.
I agree.
But we were 6th.
That's well, then that just supports throwing the ball then as much as they did, I mean, on the surface of it, 70-30, you'd cringe a little bit if you heard that going into that game. Like, if I told you Geno Smith's going to throw 70% and we're going to run 30%, you would have been, ooh, how many touchdowns?
Yeah. Do you think that, do you think it was just because they knew the Broncos would expect that, so they wanted to come out swinging with Geno, and it worked for that first half, and then you have second half adjustments?
There was a lot of overthinking into this game from the coaching staff and Carroll coming into it. They did a lot of different little tiny things, watching that all 22 tape and how those defensive players were playing it on the edges. And, Chuno had the player of the week, but he was playing so many snaps in a spiral where he wasn't even, rushing the passer or doing anything else. And they would flip. They were flipping how they'd spy on either side. And then so on the surface of it, I'm just not sure still what to expect. I think last week was a little bit unique and this week will be something else, I think, but they had a lot they put in that game last week. I think that was built on how to beat that Bronco team. We talk about defensively, it looked like they were also anticipating the Bronco team was going to try to stop them in the run game and make Geno pass the ball. So Seattle just went, F it. You're going to force us into this corner anyway. Why don't we just come out swinging out of that same corner rather than waiting for you to pin us into that box? Like, what they would do in the past, which is run first down, run second down. Oh, crap, now we're in a 3rd and long. They just came out and they were being more aggressive on 1st and 2nd down, which I advocate for that, Brendan. They need to pass more on 1st down because they went years where they would run the ball every time 1st down. Russell had that big first half in 2020 because they're statistically went from being the team that passed the least on 1st down to being the team that passed the most on 1st down through the first half of that year. And then they started dialing it back and went back to their same old stuff. But there's success to be had on passing on early downs. You can still run the ball a lot. It's just choosing on when you run versus when you pass.
Yeah, I completely agree. There have been many studies done that tell you that passing on 1st down a lot is a good thing. And if it's a situational thing where you're zigging when the other team is expecting you to zag, then of course it's great. And that first half, you have to say it worked. And maybe in the second half, halftime adjustments caught up to you a little bit. And it wasn't as successful, but you should have scored 24 points in that first half, really.
Yeah. No, it was there to be had. And if you got a couple interceptions with it too, you could have flipped some things on the other way from what the Broncos put up from a point standpoint. So, yeah, I think, I think they're going to be committing to the run here eventually. I don't think they're going to throw 70-30, but if I think teams do want to come up and put guys in the box like that, and that Parkinson play still stands out to me, where you got the Broncos almost with 9 guys in the box, 9, not 8, but 9 guys in the box. And that's going to lead a seam route goes straight up the field is going to be wide open on that kind of play because there's just not enough guys in the back end to cover at that point.
Yeah. Joey Berardi, thank you for the $1.99, and I also saw your 99 cents up above there. Thank you. Will D. Eskridge become an offensive factor? This is an interesting one because he had 5 snaps on Monday night, and it seems to me he can only run one route.
5?
Yeah, 5 snaps. So does he not know the offense somehow? Is that what it is? Does he not know how to run these routes? Because whenever he's in, he only does one thing.
I didn't know it was. I looked at the PF scores. I didn't see that. I wasn't paying attention on Eskridge's close, but that's ridiculous. 5 for a second round player last year. I don't know. I pointed this last year when he came back off the injury because everybody tells me it's the injury and the concussion, and he got hit like Tyson hit him. What do you expect from him after Mike Tyson hit him? He's going to need a few weeks. Okay. He came back healthy at one point or another, though, and still couldn't crack past Benny Hart or Freddie Swain. That was both of those guys were still staying up ahead of him in the depth chart. And it seems this is still now continuing on a little bit this year. Joey, I'm frustrated by it. I don't understand it. Even if you just want to bring D in to run fly sweeps and bubble screens, and that's the only time you're going to get him snaps, at least use him for that. At least try that. The one throw that they threw to him was a little outlet pass out to the side, which is not what one of those two things. Instead, you threw your bubble screens to DK, and that's not really DK's game. I'm perplexed, man. What about you? I don't get it. What they're trying to do here with him.
Yeah, just for the record, Goodwin had 29 snaps, so he's the clear number 3, and Derek Young had 4, so they're basically at equilibrium.
Ooh, good. It's not a good look, man. That's not a good look.
I will say this though: on the first sack that Gino got hit with, a lot of people think that he was squaring up to hit Eskridge deep down the field. He was running a go route, and it looked like he was coming open. A lot of people think Gino was about to hit him for a long touchdown, and then Cross couldn't quite hold up, or depending on who you blame, maybe Gino should step up, whatever.
Well, that makes sense why he didn't step up, because he was just about to go into his throwing motion, which he was trying to make that determination of, I got enough time to get out of here before he hits me. Mm-hmm. It makes sense.
But I expect Eskridge to be a factor because he is the best guy we have for the fly sweeps and the bubble screens. Mm-hmm. Maybe it just wasn't a big part of the playbook in that first game. Maybe we saw something with Denver's defense that told us it wasn't going to work. I will say the one time Eskridge got the ball in his hands on that one play you were talking about, I did not appreciate the fact that he tried to run over a linebacker instead of going around him, because the linebacker probably weighs like 80 pounds more than him or something.
Yeah, do the little cheetah thing. Like you're 4-3, just go in a nice circle around him. You got all this space on either side of you. Just go lateral and get up around him. Yeah, he just didn't even give a juke. Just sort of like, I'm gonna put my shoulder down. It's like, you're 5'9", my guy. I know you got a little bit of extra weight for a 5'9" guy than they normally would have, but you don't have that much extra weight. Yeah,
he doesn't even feel you, dude. You run into him and it's just like, ding.
Yeah, they're just gonna fall on the ground like, thank you. He's gonna say thank you after you know. So yeah, they got to work him on. You made this kid a second round pick. You had a plan for him when you selected him. We knew he wasn't going to be a fully refined guy. We've been talking about this for a while. He's not a full 100 meal deal receiver yet, and maybe he'll be that. But while he's in the process of getting there, let's get some value out of that second round aspect of him a little bit.
The Snail, thank you for the $2 again. Go Bolts, go. Also, Adam Rank is a clown. Was he the guy who predicted the Niners were going to go 2-14 the year they went to the Super Bowl? I think he was.
Sounds right. I honestly don't recognize his name. So
there was a meme picture circulating the year the Niners made the Super Bowl of him predicting the Niners schedule, and I think he had them at 2-14, and then they ended up going 13-3 and almost winning the Super Bowl. So I think that he's the guy from the meme.
Oh, well, I'm not gonna put a lot of stock into the 40 points. He ain't win and pull me over there with that prediction.
Mhm. Okay, let's talk about the Seahawks offense a little bit here, because just because we can stop the Niners from scoring doesn't mean we're necessarily going to be able to score ourselves. So, good news, Damian Lewis looks ready to go. Kenneth Walker may play as well. So the offense is getting a little healthier. And generally speaking, do you think the offense is going to zag the other way and run the ball more in this game compared to that Broncos game? Because if you were doing it because you knew the Broncos were expecting the pass, I mean the run, and you decided to hit them with the pass, do you zig back the other way? Or do you just want to do it anyway because it's going to be raining and that's your personnel strength? Or are we going to let Geno cook again?
Boy, a lot of factors at play there, because I think running, if it's going to rain, like there is some predictions of where it's going to come down. It doesn't matter whether you're in Chicago or San Francisco. The type of rain that falls in a September is going to be usually a heavy, like the drops have extra couple ounces to each drop, and it's really leaving tangible wetness behind. And if it does that, Brendan, it's going to turn into a run game nature on both sides of the ball, whatever the play plan was. If we just say that it's not as bad and it's pretty minimized and maybe it's a little drizzle in there, my first inclination is to say that you're going to try to run the ball. The Niners went to that wide 9 approach a couple of years ago on their defensive line, which is it's a wide 9 in the technique on the outside guys. That's for the usually a defensive end, but the wide 9 technique also has the defensive tackles doing kind of what the inverse of our defensive tackles are doing right now, which is you spread them out a little wider. Instead of having 2 1 techs like we do, the Niners have 2 3 techs. So it's like they have 2 Leos and 2 3 techs is how they run their defensive line more often than not. So there's going to be holes inside on those interior gaps from that. If you can run the ball well, getting back Damian Lewis is going to be a big benefit on that, Brendan, to be able to attack that way. Also talking to the Niner guy last night, because he was saying they were going to try to switch to more man a year ago, and now he's saying that they have not been able to convert to man. They didn't bring in the personnel for man, so they're still running a lot of zone. I'm estimating you're going to see Niner fans were getting mad about in their chat last night was they were running a lot of that soft zone stuff that you will see with us from time to time. And if they do that, that's what we were hitting a little bit in this last game was those comeback routes, short routes to DK. You're going to go 5-6 yards and you're just going to give us that for free. We'll take it in the passing game. And Geno can make those kind of throws. So I think some of that's going to be dictated to that, where you're not as worried about their pass rush at that point because you're getting the ball out of your hand quick, because you know those early developing routes are going to be open because the defense is playing kind of a soft coverage on the backside. So I see a little bit of it more going that way, but this defense is legitimate, Brendan. I was looking at the stats on them. They were 3rd in total yards last year, 6th against the pass, 7th against the run, and 10th in points allowed. So whereas we're a defense last year that gave up all of those yards, but then didn't give up as many points, they were a team that was all the way down the line as far as their markers of a defense were really, all of them were solid fundamentals that were there for them as far as they're good in every aspect. There's not really a big fat hole with them. Though I will say it was interesting, as good as those numbers were for them, Brendan, they gave up 21.5 points last year. Your Seahawks gave up 21.8 points last year. So a 0.3 difference. This defensive Niners so great that everyone tells us the NFL awesome. And then we were within 0.3 of them as far as total points given up, last year. And one other key thing here, Jimmy Ward's out. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Our defense last year was not bad, though. I mean, it gave up a lot of yards, especially early in the season, but we were, I think, 11th in points allowed. And the only reason why we weren't well in the top 10 was because of garbage time at the end of the year when Detroit piled up 3 touchdowns when the game was over.
Yeah.
But yeah, how does this Niners secondary do it? Because I remember last year they were down to the nub in terms of personnel, and Aaron Rodgers and Matt Stafford couldn't crack it. So what is up with these secondary guys in particular? Because you look at the names and they're not really big names, but they find a way.
Well, they're gonna make you play patient. They're not going to let you give up big plays. They know that if you try to go for the big play, you're not going to be able to pass protect long enough to be able to. Their pass rushers will get you. And Joey Bosa is a monster, and he's tough to deal with. So they know that you're not going to have the guts to run 7-step drops, and so their guys can play a little bit off the 3 and 5-step drops at times, and stay sticky in coverage, and probably run those zone routes a little bit tighter than even we sometimes have run them in recent history. That's been into my eyes. They obviously do the nice 2 fundamental things you want a defense to start with, which is usually stop the run and you're able to get to the passer. And whatever you're doing on the back end, that's that old school approach of it starts in the trenches. That's why they say it starts in the trenches, because that stuff can overcome deficiencies on the back end. Not specifically not having good corner play necessarily, like top notch corner play. Mosley was okay for them last year, but every time I watched him, I felt like we were doing pretty good against him. I didn't think he was all that on that side of it for him. So I think it cleans up a lot. That front four, they drafted Drake Jackson this last draft out of USC with his ghost move. And now he's comboed in there with Armstead and Bosa, and they've got Kerry Hyder back in there. They've got a fairly deep, good crew there that they can run at you. So you definitely want to avoid in this situation, Brendan, getting into hafting to pass situations, because they will kill you if you get into that spot. But Jimmy Ward has given our Hawks some problems. Him being out's a big loss. He's one of the better safeties in the league.
Yeah, you're right. That's a big one. Jason Verrett's out too, but he's always out. So.
When is he not out? Man spent more time on the iron in his career than he's been on the football field.
Right. But yeah, if you look at the interior of the defense, it's a little different. Like I look at their edge players, and you've got Bosa, you've got Ebukam, who I've always kind of liked. I know he's not the greatest player ever, but I've always liked Ebukam. Drake Jackson, like you said, they've got Kerry Hyder, who I liked last year. But you look in the middle, you've got like Javon Kinlaw, the infamous bust. Eric Armstead's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Hassan Ridgeway from the draft. I remember kind of liking him. He struck me as like
big
maybe a
tech.
pure nose.
Big pure nose. Yeah, exactly.
But maybe the best way forward is to run the ball up the middle on him, kind of like I said what I thought was going to be against Denver. And then DJ Jones really did a pretty good job kind of disrupting that. So maybe I would be wrong again, but I kind of look at this defense and I go, can you run up the gut on him a little bit?
Ironic maybe then that the Niners missing DJ Jones this year in this upcoming matchup, just a week after he gave our Hawks trouble in the run game up the middle, is now a little more exposed, isn't it? Wouldn't that be kind of interesting if it turns that way? You've got to continue, I think, this is why you've got to build in the fly sweeps and build in the outside zone stuff, and give Weldon some props last week. It wasn't always successful in running it, but the first play of the game was a pitch play to Rashad Penny, and it made my heart sore, because you know me with just wanting to see the outside stuff. Just give me a couple. So they did it a few times, and I like seeing it. It's going to help this offense out. It's going to make defenses have to be more legitimate down on the interior, meaning they can't squish things up in here because they know everything's coming up over the center. So I'm really hopeful they continue to employ that diverse scheme. But if you walk up and see them running that wide 9 technique, and you see those two defensive tackles basically running heads up over the guards, I say all day you should have Geno auto-bowling into that inside zone at that point and attacking it right up the middle and pressing those young guys. And the guy you mentioned that was in the draft, he's a later round guy. He wasn't anything. Ridgeway, yeah. It wasn't anything major. And both Kinlaw is completely untested / into the kind of a busty state. And Armstead's a guy that sort of runs hot and cold. I look at him as almost at this point more of a pass rusher than I see him as really a great run defender, though I could be wrong on that.
Yeah. He was a guy that I looked at as being one of those big trash cans full of dirt more than any kind of a pass rusher. But yeah, just the main thing that stood out to me when I was looking at this Niners defense. Let's see what else here. Rookie tackles against Nick Bosa. How's this one going to go?
Cross could do great all day, Brendan, but if he's bad on 3 or 4 plays, it could look like a hellacious day. Which I think is going to happen here is that he's going to put up a really good fight in this game, but Bosa's going to have a couple of sacks throughout the course of the game, because Bosa's just that good. Now, does Seattle commit to using a little bit more help to him? Seattle liked to throw to the running backs of the backfield a little bit this last game with Geno. And do you sacrifice that to get that chip block in on Bosa at that point? You might have to. I mean, frankly, I'm not really scared as much about Drake Jackson or Armstead or anybody else on this line. If I can find a way to neutralize Bosa, he's kind of their Donald. And as I've said with Donald in the past, I just go, look, I'm going to just commit to doubling him the whole game. I know it's not your scheme. It's not what you want. There's a lot of this. That's not what our scheme asks the player to do. I don't care. Stop the guy that's killed you year after year, game after game, twice a season. He's destroying your game plan. I know you don't want to do it, but you've got to do it. And this guy, I don't want to see Bosa destroying our game plan or just running back wild. So I think you got to mix it up with him a little bit on that, Brendan. But I think we can't take too much away from Cross's day if he happens to have a couple of sacks, if he looks good on those other side of things, because that's a lot. Bosa's one of the best in the game.
I'm not interested in taking Cross to task really this year. Whatever happens, he's a rookie, and
yes,
You just made me think of. Do you remember the NFC title game against Carolina where we had 4 guys following Steve Smith everywhere?
Yes, it was
That
awesome.
that's I loved it because it was just like they said, you know what, screw the scheme, screw everything else. This is the only guy they have that can get separation. So why
One of
even
them,
mess with it?
and they took it to extreme, Brendan. They took it was Bentley, the linebacker, and they stuck him in press coverage on Smith on the outside. They took an outside linebacker, put him on in press coverage on Smith, and then, like you said, then double and triple around him. But what they did is they just beat the hell out of him on the line of scrimmage because Smith was a bad mofo, but against a cornerback, you put him up against a linebacker's going to eat lunch, and so linebackers would just sit there and chuck him all day. And yeah, I think it won us that game in a lot of respects. That strategy.
And he's sitting there thinking like this is like such a this is not fair. He's probably sitting there thinking like this is not the way NFL football's meant to be played. Like you guys aren't even giving me a chance. That's why he came in for the punt return on that one play because he's like, give me the damn
Exactly.
ball somehow.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you won by 3 touchdowns and he didn't do anything. So yeah, that's
And Delhomme kept
what you got to
forcing
do
it
to
to him.
win.
You got an interception from Tatupu in that game because Delhomme kept forcing the ball in even through the triple coverage. I mean, the interception with Lofa that he catches, it's like Seahawks defender here, Lofa over the top, and Smith right here. And the ball sails a little bit because he's trying to lay it in between all 3 of these guys to Delhomme because Smith was that much of a game-changing talent at that point. We all know Smith was good, but at that time in 05, Smith was like maybe the best wide receiver in the sport that year, even at his size. And so he was that kind of problem. And I just don't like, Brendan, I don't like letting the best player beat you on a team. I feel like you have some control of that. This is part of what made Bill Belichick so great as a coach. Is game after game, in these big games especially, he will say, I'm taking away your most important offense or defensive player. I'm going to make you have somebody else beat us. And to me, it's a simple concept, but it's a very still useful one.
Yeah, and it was particularly pertinent because the week before they played the Bears, and the Bears were very adamant about how we're not going to change our defense. We're going to stay in that cover 2, or no, it was the Tampa 2, and we're just going to treat them like anybody else. And he destroyed them. It was actually kind of hysterical
Yeah.
that they were. I mean, Urlacher was basically in the media. I remember this bragging about how, we don't think he's any better than any other receiver in the league. We're going to play him straight up. And we don't care. We don't care how good you think he is. To us, he's just another guy. And he teabagged them for 3 hours basically, and it was so bizarre because the Bears were the better team that year, and it just seems so ridiculous that out of pride they let this one guy beat them.
Yeah, it's ridiculous is the right word because it's something you can control. And I know all these coaches have their schemes and their way they want to play, but you've got to also do a little bit of looking across what you're dealing with on the other side of it and take into account. Otherwise, you're leaving an advantage at that point. If you just blindly go in and say, we're going to make you deal with us. Okay. So they're going to look out, find your weaknesses and go at you because every football team is going to have weaknesses. There is no super team that's got no weaknesses anywhere. So every team's got some place you can kind of hit. So that tough talk and that sort of, machismo stuff is so, to me, outdated. And you have to encompass what the person is across from you. And especially that team, because you took him away, Brendan. They had no other receiver. There was no second option. That wasn't even a matter of we'll make one of their other guys beat us. They have nobody else to beat you. Nobody else. That guy is the only guy that they have offensively that they can run. They were down a couple running backs coming in that game, and then Lofa conked out the Goins, their 3rd stringer, and so they were down to like their 4th string running back at that point. So no tight ends, no number 2 wide receivers. Yes, do that. And the same thing.
Colbert, that was the number 2 receiver.
Kerry Colbert. Future Seahawk, Kerry Colbert. I believe he eventually became a Hawk for 5 minutes when we were down to like 0 receivers in 07. But yeah, it's don't do that. If the team's got a multitude of guys and you got to play it even up like that, I get that. Like if it's more of, we can't just count. There's other guys here who can hurt us. But if it's really like, no, there's this one guy that's a wrecking force, then devote a little bit more extra. Just give a little bit. Not, you don't have to chip him every time, but chip him like 30% of the time.
Yeah, chip him on those big 3rd downs. Like when we played the Broncos, we had that 3rd and 6 on our final drive, and we left Cross 1-on-1. He got beat. I didn't hate the game plan or anything like that. Let Cross, do what he can. But part of me was also like, that would have been a decent opportunity to maybe help him out a little bit because I'm pretty sure if you give Geno another half second, he's hitting Metcalf and keeping that drive going.
Yeah. Agreed. And we don't do it. I think to your eyes, if I'm not mistaken, it's been the same to mine, which is that we haven't done a lot of chipping in recent years. That wasn't a big part of what we did with Russell here. It was very it's very infrequently has been moved in. And I don't really understand is why, because it's so effective. I don't know. Did you see that Micah Parsons shot he took on a chip?
Yeah, the Leonard Fournette.
Oh, it had the defensive players so mad on Twitter the second they saw it because they were like, this needs to be out of the game. And I'm like, look, when they're telling you that, then that means you need to be utilizing that until they take it out of the game because like that's that effective. And those guys like Bosa that push so hard to that corner, they push to that arc so hard rather than countering to the inside very often. It's all just basically, I'm going to hand usage you, quickness you, and then overpower you. And then when I flatten the route to the quarterback, well, that's where the chip comes in at its best, right? Because the chip, you're coming naturally into the chip there, as opposed to if he runs it inside, you're not going to get to him inside on the chip. So it's right there to happen with the way Bosa likes to run. You got a guy like Dallas or Homer out there at times. Let him. Those guys are capable. Give him a little.
You got to let Homer redeem himself after he got run over by what's his name on that first drive.
Yeah, exactly. Just a little people's elbow to the chops, man. Just something to wake him up a little bit.
Yeah, I like it. Especially if, after it got put on a national podium like that, in that Dallas game on Sunday night, you wonder if maybe the league's going to take a look at that, because usually that's what happens. Something big occurs. Sometimes maybe even a big star player will get injured, and then the league goes, oh, okay, we can't have that anymore. Like when Brady got hit low, and then they changed the rules about how you can't hit quarterbacks low anymore.
It's possible. It's a brutal shot. That shot coming in from a running back, and if he's a strong guy like Fournette, if he's a little bit of a bigger cat coming in with that force and speed, he's got a free run at the guy who's engaged. NFL's outlawed already that you can't engage, low when you got a guy high. So they've already kind of been aware of like, we got a guy engaged. We can't have him being allowed to just get beat the hell up on the other side of it by another guy. We've got to kind of protect that. I think eventually they probably will, because those guys can land some shots. I've seen some guys go down defender wise from those shots that it's just, you can get hurt pretty bad. I mean, it's a big blow you're taking from those guys, especially if it's a bigger back and a guy really committed to laying a hit. I remember one year it was D Ford went down, and I remember Christian Michael in a preseason game, I think like broke his rib on one of those shots. I remember just going, oh Lord. And I don't want to play defensive end in the NFL. You do this great move, you come off, you rip your hands through, you're hearing like Rocky music in your head as you come around the corner. And then this guy that you never saw coming just lights you up in your chest. It's like those crackback blocks, where you never see it coming.
Right. The Snail, thank you for the $5 again. How about Shaun going into the Ring of Honor? MVP. Yeah, I made a video about this earlier today. I think this is overdue, and I'm actually really happy about this.
Mm-hmm. I'm good with it too. I wouldn't want to retire his number. This is one of those guys that I put into the Ring of Honor, but I wouldn't put him into that special of a state of things. Like there should be other 37s out there. Nonetheless, he's earned it. Run for more yards than any other Seahawk in Seahawk history. Has more touchdowns than the other Seahawk in Seahawks history. Only MVP in our history, and it's hard for running backs to win MVP. It's not easy. I mean, did Henry win an MVP in those last couple of years? No,
I don't think Henry's been in the race. It's always a quarterback. Yeah. And last year, some people were talking about what's his name on the Colts, the running back, John Taylor, but it's never going to happen. It just doesn't happen anymore.
But Shaun was able to do it. And that 1,800-yard season with like 27, 28, 30 touchdowns, whatever it is that he had, it was an amazing year for him to have. It's going to be one of the great eternal debates that goes on in Seahawks fandom for years to come. I've seen it in my chat over. I'm sure you have as well, of there being a very much a divisive opinion. For a guy that racked up 10,000 yards and 100 and some touchdowns here, there is some divisiveness with Shaun. I'm not one of them. I appreciate his skill set. It's like I've said with Penny. It's like running backs come in every shape and size, different types of skill set. You got to embrace them for what they are if they're effective. And Shaun was effective. But his running style was also sometimes tough.
He was a vision back.
He was.
Yeah, that's at the end of the day, if you gave him the holes, he was going to be great at reading the blocking. He was going to be great at reading where the hole was going to be and getting there. He was not somebody who ran people over. He was not somebody who outran everybody or made everybody miss. That's the kind of player he was. And obviously there was a negative stigma surrounding him by the time he left Seattle because he got paid and didn't really produce. But look, back then, people didn't know any better. We didn't know that it was a bad idea to give a running back 350 touches a year for 5 years and then give him a massive contract. We didn't
Mhm.
know.
It was the old way. The old way was you'd still pay those guys.
Mm-hmm. And it ended up being a bad idea. But if you look at modern running backs, they usually break down way before that. Running backs are breaking down after a 3 seasons like that. He had 5. So, no, I don't hold any animosity towards them.
I think it's also the thing with the going down easy on contact versus you got him inside the 20-yard line and he ran harder than Marshawn. I mean, he legit was a harder guy to bring down inside the 20 when he was in the red zone than Marshawn Lynch was. I'm not overstating that. I'll go and die on that hill. I will die on that hill saying Shaun Alexander could run harder than Marshawn in the red zone, but he would run as soft as Sharman in between the 20s. And that was even when he was racking up the 1,800-yard season where there'd be times a guy puts a hand on him and he's dropping to the turf, curling up into a ball. And that's, I think, where some of that comes from as well, on top of the fact that he would never pass block. Mike Holmgren talked about this today too, where it's, he hated pass blocking and the Stones were a little bit hands. He had a little bit of Stones of hands. So it's like he ran the ball well, but there were some things on the other side of how he was as a player that are valid criticisms of him, I think,
Yeah, I wish DK Metcalf would kind of learn how to go down after getting hit sometimes.
Well, receiver's different than running back. I don't need my receivers to go out there and, break 50 tackles. Like they can do the whole Lockett, I'll catch the ball and roll into a bunch of circles until somebody touches me thing. That's fine with me. But
yeah,
running back, I need you at times to, especially Brandon, it'd be one thing if it was like he was soft like that, and that's just his style, like you say, he's vision, and sometimes it's gonna be soft, but he'll still give you those 50-yarders. But then you watch him inside the 20, and he's like, "Get off me, get off me," and then he's like diving over a guy and barrel rolling over a defensive tackle, and you're like, whoa, he's got that. He can do that. That's the thing that threw you off, is you're just like, why doesn't he do that thing all the time? Run like that more.
Yeah, there was some stuff that Shaun did at various points of his career that kind of made it seem like he was more about me than the team. And I know, and I get that stuff. That stuff, it makes sense to me that people are kind of like, when they think back on him. But I think a lot of that stuff is also overstated, to be perfectly honest. In many ways, he was like our Russell Wilson. It's just there wasn't social media back then. He was a great player, but people were frustrated with the money that he was taking, especially at the end there. They were frustrated with he seemed like he was a little bit, I don't know. I remember after the Super Bowl, he didn't seem too upset about the fact that we had lost, whereas Hasselbeck did. I just remember that for some reason. It could be me misremembering, but that's kind of the feeling that I got. So I get some of it, but I don't like the fact that after he left Seattle, it almost felt like he became an outcast.
Agreed.
In the Seahawks community.
He should be revered. I think the debate's a healthy one to have between the fan base on where they stand on him. But 10,000 yards is 10,000 yards, and it's going to become even more. It could become more or less depending on this extra game this adds. But I think players are going to continue to play shorter careers, which is going to make it harder to hit that 10,000 mark rushing yards, especially with the 100 touchdown combo. And that's legitimate. You don't get there just because you have 2 Hall of Famers blocking for you on the left side of an offensive line for the majority of your career. You get there because you're a good damn running back. And so, I think he does deserve his praise here. He deserves to be in the Ring of Honor. And again, just as I said, there's always lessons and things to be bred. And again, there's not just that one brand of type of running back. There's not just that I'm looking for the guy that does this and this and this. It's like there's just everything under the sun. Like Crail crayons that are in those. Remember those the 15 packs that had the 6 tiers. Running backs are the same way. They come in all of those different tiers, and you just gotta. They're good. They're good. That's the bottom line with it. Not is their style the right one or not.
A Indrex A, thank you for the $4.99. Win or lose, I think we win, by the way. Are the Killer Bees excited to test our young Hawks to play a Super Bowl roster? I still think we have Niners number. Didn't we kind of test our roster against a Super Bowl roster on Monday night? At least
sort of feels like that to me. I feel like we did.
Or so they would.
That's what the media told us. Yeah, the media's been telling you that. They've been telling me that too, I think. So it's kind of like we beat a Super Bowl roster already. Do we already have number 2 on there? Sure. Why not?
Yeah. But the fundamental question behind this donation, Yeah, it's fun to see this team get tested by against great teams because there are definitely going to be some teams we play this year that are going to have their way. Like I don't think there's any way we beat Tampa. There's no way we beat the Chargers, unless the Rams really fall apart like beyond what they showed on Thursday night or last Thursday night. Then probably not them. But I'm interested to see how they respond to the challenge for sure.
Me as well. There's really two specific points on this. I think that do remove a little bit of us having their number as it pertains to this year, and this being a little bit of a refresh with the Niners in our battle with them. No Russell, who obviously gave them problems through the years, especially when it came down the wire. He had quite a few games there against the Niners with those last couple minutes, last few seconds touchdowns to put us over the top at times. But then also like our defense with that 4-3 defense and our willingness to play against the run first and foremost. The Niners are a team that takes advantage of the NFL and having so many NFL defenses that are built to stop the pass first and foremost, and that they'll get around to stopping the run, but they're really worried about the pass and getting their pass rushers off and making sure their coverages are all over the place and hard to read, and they can disguise stuff. So when the Niners run into a team like us has Coach Carroll, who in his base foundations is limit the big play, stop the run, limit the big play. I mean, these are the beginnings of his team in many respects. That's going to give you a natural edge. My worry, though, is that weird, wonky 4-man front that we ran a lot of the time against the Broncos I don't think that's going to work against this team. I think you're setting up for some problems there. And then now you're going to, if you don't do that, you're going to probably go to the 3-4, the Fangio stuff. And that's with your 3-4 defensive ends in this Fangio scheme, Adrian X, line up to the inside of the shoulder of the tackles. So the key on that is that you give those tackles natural leverage to the outside when you do that. Now it's supposed to be a gap-based defense, so you're supposed to have a guy coming up in the gap to clear the gap on either side of that defensive end. But that's, again, another thing that's easy in theory, harder in practice.
Hey Stern, thank you for the $2. How do you think the defense will play Trey Lance? Trey Lance specifically? I mean, you got to anticipate they're going to use him in a very he's going to do a lot of those Jalen Hurts type things. I think you kind of already mentioned that. So I liked your idea, the 4-3 Sam.
Yeah, I think the 4-3 defense from last year, Chase, I'm not looking to try it out any other time but when we play the Niners this year. There's not one other team on our schedule that I would run that defense out for. This is the one defense I would do it for. And because, again, I think this shows them a de facto 5-man front that gets them now to start to lean out of their running game a little bit. And that's what it was just mentioned by Adrian X, us having that advantage in the past. That reestablishes that natural advantage you have, because you're going to have still Carroll's philosophy to want to stop the run first and foremost, just in general terms. Now you got the scheme on top of it you're employing against the Niners to really take advantage of that philosophy and how you're going to game plan and game call it as far as defensively. Stopping the run, though, Chase, is where I believe this game's out. And that's both Lance and the running game. They're going to have to play it very clean because there's going to be a lot of those read option things. But yeah, you don't make no mistake about it. It's going to be, to me, all about how not all, but mostly it's about how they stop the run in this game that will determine it. I feel like how we stop the run and how we run the ball is really where this whole game is going to come down to.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know I kind of said that last week and it didn't really go that way, but I think the team will revert to what we expected.
That was just a weird game last week, though. I mean, that was so outside of what anyone I think could have established. Just the pass to run rate and all that stuff was just so weird. That was just so wild, Brendan. Yeah. But I think it does fit this week as much as ever, because these are two teams that they really, with Broncos, you knew they were going to want to pass with Russ and feature him a little bit more. With this week, it's going to be, we're going to probably see, what would you say, 50, 55 runs in total between the two teams at the end of the game.
Right. 283, thank you for the $1.99. 54 and 3 get retired, right? 54 is definitely getting retired. We'll see how the organization feels about Russ when he retires, because right now it wouldn't, because I don't think anybody in that building likes him very much. I'm sure you've seen the stuff from KJ about how, like, I have never heard Pete talk about anybody the way he's talked about Wilson this week. So there's some bad blood there, but that may go away by the time Wilson retires.
It may, but I think that this is one that cuts to the heart, cuts right to the heart between those two guys. And as I've said, I feel like from Carroll's standpoint, and I'm guessing this, but that's what we do here is we guess. And that the feeling I get off of it is it's just like, it's a bit of a rejection from Carroll, where I feel like, number 3 rejected me and my process and what helped to get him where he is. And Carroll also mentioned in his stuff about not being about the team now, and he is not. KG is right. He's not parsed his words. There's a reason why you're seeing this Carroll soundbite making its rounds. And Carroll with the whole, they asked him, should the Seahawks fan boo? And he didn't take it. Well, let them do what they're going to do, and it basically opened the door for people to boo. And you kind of wanted it to happen with that rather than stamping that down at all. And so there's definitely, bad blood's a good way to put it, but there's some real bitterness here upon Russell Wilson leaving within that organization and how they view this situation and his exit and what he did. I think, Brendan, that goes back to all that Mark Rogers stuff and all of this setting it up a year ahead and making it hard on the organization and submitting the 4-team list last year. I think all of that kind of factors in.
The Colts retired 18.
I don't think they have yet.
Yeah, because Irsay kind of intimated that he didn't really like Peyton that much at the end. I remember, Irsay is kind of an idiot in general. He just says stupid stuff all the time, but he had a quote that was like, I really think we could have gotten more than one Super Bowl out of Peyton if he's as good as people and I remember, and I kind of wonder, are they really going to have a guy win 4 MVPs at quarterback and then they don't retire his number? But that bad blood can go a long way.
Well, and when the players is so indoctrinated into a different organization now, where Peyton's basically a Bronco, like he's Bronco and he's helping them out, and he's still there part of in the facilities at times, and so that's probably also a little bit from Irsay's standpoint of like, okay, well, you've picked your team, and maybe Russell does the same thing, and then he picks this is where all the old quarterbacks go to pasture now, I guess, is in Denver to then have their number retired for playing the back half of their career there, where okay, Peyton's going to play for 4 years for you, Denver, and you're going to retire his number now there. And before I don't know. 54 definitely gets retired. 3 makes the Ring of Honor. I don't know that he gets his number retired, though. 54 is absolutely on both marks, check and check. Absolutely. But 3 now.
The Snail, thank you for the $2. MVP Shaun should be in the Hall of Fame. Hill, I'll die on. If Edgerrin James is in the Hall of Fame, then I actually think Alexander should be as well. I'll say that.
And that's where I'm going to differ. Edgerrin James could catch the ball out of the backfield as good as any running back in the NFL when he was in his prime. No one ever said that about Shaun. Shaun had a good amount of catches in his career, but a lot of it was set out of the screens because Mike Holmgren was awesome at calling screens during his time. So that was where a lot of the catches to Shaun Alexander were based from. But Edgerrin also was awesome in pass protection. He would stick his nose in there and put his nose in and stop guys and shut them down, helping Peyton out at times. And that was a big boon to that Colts offense to have a running back that could do those type of things. Both of those 2 attributes were not Shaun. As well as Edgerrin James, I don't believe had one Hall of Famer blocking in front of him. Maybe one with the center. The center was his only. Jeff Saturday will become the only Hall of Famer he had blocking in front of him. He had a decent offensive line, but that was also an offensive line from Edgerrin James' standpoint that was built to pass protect first and foremost. Whereas Shaun had 2 guys in Walter and Hutch. You could probably say their best 2 skill attributes were run blocking first, though Walter was complete. That was probably where Hutchinson was at his best, was run blocking moving forward.
Yeah, but here's my thing, though. The Hall of Fame is about production. And I think Shaun Alexander had more production. Yes, Edge was a more well-rounded player.
Is it about production? I think that's a factor. I think that's a factor, but I don't think that that's the only thing you base it upon. I think there's a lot of different things that come into play on it. How were you as a leader? How dominant were you? Were you dominant for a 10-year stretch? Having those guys up front that he had to help him, having a guy like Mike Holmgren calling the plays, having a functional pass, you got to take into account. I think it's important here because of the fact, again, there's a log jam of running backs right at that 10,000 yard mark. Edgerrin James is 250 yards ahead of Shaun as far as rushing yards go. I believe he's probably got a good number of catches ahead of Shaun. There is a little distance between where Edgerrin sits and where Shaun sits. And if you look around Shaun, there's a whole lot of running backs right along in there with him who you would not say are Hall of Famers. And this is where we've got to be careful of making the Hall of Fame about the Hall of Very Good rather than the Hall of Great. That's what it should be. It should be a special place, not a, hey, we take everyone type spot. That's why you have Ring of Honors. That's why you have an ability to retire jerseys so that there's sort of tiers to this, in my opinion.
Yeah, my thing with that also is that Edge got to play with Peyton Manning. That's a pretty big advantage, right? Do you
Well, it
agree
is,
with
but
that?
does it not necessarily for a running back, not for a guy that has a guy. Peyton Manning wants to throw the ball. So if he's got a situation where it's 50-50 between calling an audible, the run or pass, he's going to want to pass. Look at that situation that happened with that famous mic'd up moment between Jeff Saturday and Peyton Manning, where Jeff's like, can we just run the damn ball? And then Peyton's over there bitching and moaning. They almost get in a fist fight on the sideline about to go at it with each other because Peyton's wanting to call so many passes. So did he commit as much at times always to the running game and running situations, or did Peyton want to, get that MVP trophy and make sure it was, I tend to lean, yeah, it helps a little bit, but does it help completely all the way? I don't know. And if you look at what he had versus Shaun with the two Hall of Famers on the left side, Robbie Tobeck, Locklear good on the right side until they moved him to the left side. Mac Strong is your the best blocking fullback in the game. Undeniably the best blocking fullback in the game at that time. Absolute linebacker clearer out of holes. And then you have Hasselbeck, who, though he wasn't great, was a multiple-time Pro Bowler. Yeah, he's not Peyton Manning, but he was a multiple-time Pro Bowler who was efficient. And then you had decent receivers on the outside, decent tight end. I think he had there was a lot to work with. It wasn't like Shaun was kind of shouldering the whole burden there of outside of just Hutch and Walt, it was all on kind of him,
Yeah, I will say the MVP year we had no receivers, and he was shouldering a lot of the offensive load. Like Daryl Jackson missed almost the whole year. Bobby Ingram missed half the year. Like there was a little bit of that going on there.
There was, but I mean, Joe Jurvicius came in and had an outstanding season for you. He did any better than Daryl Jackson ever did in that year with the stats that he put up. And you did get Daryl Jack by halfway into the year. Bobby came back into that year during the half. DJ Hackett really stepped forward as a fourth option.
Hackett that year?
DJ Hackett that year. That was your
Was
big play
he?
guy.
Okay. I thought he was the next year. Okay.
No, he was there for that Super Bowl year, and he was the big play guy. He was that guy who was going to make one or two catches a game, but it was going to be 35 yards down the field for a big play at a key moment. I mean, look, your point's right. It wasn't the receiver core was lightened that year a little bit, but Jurvicius was every game that year. He was really good at filling in over there, and you did have Jeremy Stevens on the other side of it that you were able to feature for his best season that year as well.
Oh yeah, Jeremy Stevens. I forgot about him.
Don't forget them UW boys.
I'd rather forget that one, but
fair enough.
Yeah, I will say this though, playing that game of like, if this guy's in the hall, then so should this guy. Like that's dangerous. Like that's how you put every quarterback in because Joe Namath is in there. That's how you put.
Right.
Like I will say we should probably chill out with that.
I think if you've got to get to a point of it being a fairly decent debate, it's probably a no. It should be if you talk about a guy, go Deion Sanders, Hall of Fame. Joe Montana, Hall of Fame. Brett Favre, Hall of Fame. Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Fame. Like you should be able to just basically say it without it being like, well, but and then let me look at the other guys running around him. If you have to start getting into that unpacking it kind of situation, it probably means they're not a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm. 283, Tyler, thank you for the $1.99. Tyler Lockett, Ring of Honor. I would say by the end of his career, maybe. I don't know if the numbers will justify it, but
he needs like about 2,500 more yards.
I think he would pull that off unless he gets hurt. So I guess I would say yeah.
So he's at 6,000 yards right now. So if you put 2,500 more yards, he's at 8,500 yards, and then he'll have probably about 60 touchdowns at that point. He's right on the probably line there, but he probably makes his way in because you also got to factor in his punt and kick return stuff that he did too. So that probably
and he's so likable. Like everybody likes Lockett. You don't see anybody. It's not like Wilson where people were getting sick of him. Nobody gets sick of Tyler Lockett.
He might end up playing his whole career here. That's the other thing with this too. He might end up playing the next 3-4 years and then they dial down the salary or whatever, but he's a guy they just keep here as that leader guy they like on the team. And if he can figure out, I think gets that 2,500 yards, another maybe 10, 15 touchdowns on there, maybe 20 even, that would definitely get him in, but he's close. It's close. Brian Blades didn't get in, did he?
I don't think so.
Yeah. I don't think Brian got in. Brian was I think Brian's at 6,000 yards where Lockett is right now from a career standpoint. So it's, Dougie's going to get in, isn't he? Ooh, wait.
I mean,
is Doug
his peak was so short. He had that year and a half where he was a top 5 receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And then his body gave out. So I don't know, man. I actually don't know. That's an interesting one. Lockett's going to have I think Lockett's going to have better counting stats.
Well, you're not wrong. I mean, look at Baldwin's career is right where basically Lockett's at right now. Almost exactly the same yards and touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, you're probably right. I mean, unless they're factoring in for Baldwin the Super Bowl thing, he probably doesn't quite get in there.
Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of wrap up the Niners. Look, we talked about both sides of the ball about as much as we can. So let's just say what we think is going to happen here. And I guess we'll do a score prediction, although I'm not crazy about them, but
I know
let's
you
throw one
love score
out.
predictions.
You know what? I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling myself right
Ooh,
now.
okay.
I'm going to say Seahawks 9, 49ers 6. I think it's all
Oh,
field
wow.
goals.
Okay,
Or maybe we
Brandon.
get a touchdown and a safety. I don't know. I'm open to it. But I'm
Bold.
going to say we win 9-6.
I like it. That's a bold prediction. And well, like we were in week one, I guess we're going to flip flop on this one. I look at the Seahawks on this one. I say short week.
Hmm.
And then I say highly motivated 49er team, while you have a Seattle team that obviously was so hyped up for that first opening game that probably, I'm not going to say expended all, shot the wad, so to speak, but definitely expended a lot to get that through that win. On the short week, I think is going to be enough to just allow the Niners to edge out by about a touchdown here myself. So I'm going to put it 2013. Because of that, where those are just the things that kind of factor into me with this. You're losing Adams, who's been a good run defender against the Niners when he's been in there, and that's helped you at times. It helped you last year on the road. Niners, his ability to come up in that element of things. I think you're getting a little drop off with Josh Jones there, though. Maybe we get somebody who can actually catch the ball from the safety position now back there instead. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to go with a little bit of a loss here for our Hawks, but again, it'll be a hard fought game. It'll be a close game. It'll probably come down to the fourth quarter in the last final drive type situation. I don't see this being either team running away from the other here.
I'm probably a little overzealous, but I do feel like it's
I
just going to
like your
come down to,
overzealousness.
like, I feel
You're
like
almost,
one team's just going to get lucky. One team's going to get lucky at the end. That's all it's going to come down to. Both these teams are going to play very similar games. And maybe there will be some fluke fumble because of the rain, or the ball slips out of somebody's hands, or somebody falls down. And it'll just be kind of almost a flip of the coin.
Kittle and Ward are two of the more important things that what they need on either side of the ball there. And to be out both of those two guys in this game is a substantial hit to this Niner team. Those guys, Ward's a guy doesn't get talked a lot about, but he's a guy, as I said, should probably be considered up in the top 3, top 4 as far as safeties in the sport. And we know what Kittle can do all the way around, not just as far as a pass catcher, but how devastating he is as a run blocker as well. And you lose both of those elements. That is enough to maybe potentially level this playing field, to your point on that, Brendan, to bring this down to that low scoring game where they are a little bit light, just a little bit too much lightened off on it. And that's enough to kind of level that out for our Hawks.
Aindrix A, thank you for the $1.99. SN40 was fraud, so 3 versus 8. I don't know what you mean there, man. I'm not sure I follow.
Do you mean Super Bowl 40?
Yeah, but what's the 3 versus 8 then?
Russell Wilson versus Hasselbeck?
Yeah, I mean, even with or without.
So okay, so I got it. I'm breaking this down. I've got some code breaking background. So what he's saying is, if Super Bowl 40 was a fraud and Matt should have won that game, then Matt's got a one Super Bowl that matches Russell's. So is Matt then vis-a-vis, should he be considered higher on maybe the quarterback pecking order hierarchically?
No. I know it's fun to hate on Russell right now, but he was in the MVP race 5 out of 6 seasons.
Not one MVP vote.
Yeah, I know, but
it'd be funny
about Matt.
It'd be funny if Matt had an MVP vote back in the day. It would be legit.
Chad Pennington does.
I know, but it would be like Matt has like 5 or something, and
yeah,
Russ got 9.
Yeah, I remember there was a YouTube video pointing out all the random weird players that had MVP votes, including, by the way, Bobby Wagner. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Tony Dungy
yeah.
voted Bobby Wagner for MVP the year we lost the Super Bowl, and I hope he lost his MVP vote after that, because that's just like it should be disqualifying.
Yeah, I agree. I think you've got to. I like outside the box, but don't go that far outside the box on it. And I'm with Brendan. I mean, Russell's had the better career than Matt. Matt was good. I like Matt. I think he's okay in hitter, and I think Matt had a hard thing. Tough part for Matt is we had a 3 or 4 year stretch there where our receivers could not catch the football, and it definitely impinged our ability to keep drives going at times and get Matt into that right rhythm to where he might have been even a better statistically on some of those seasons. But is what it is. He also threw the cannon shots on 15-yard outs. I mean, the guy would just whistle it in there at times, and he didn't make it easy on those receivers to catch that ball by doing that. So, but still, three definitely does edge him out.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for Corn Robinson to have his breakout season.
Jesus, Corn Robinson, my guy, man, he was so good, Brandon. God, he was such a talent. He could have been he could have been a Jerry Rice. He had the talent to be a Jerry Rice. He did. And it's unfortunately what caused it to not happen. But that kid was so freakish with his skills. So freakish.
Garth Knight, thank you for the $5. If LOB and Doug think Russ is a jackal, think they should be there to boost Shaun Alexander because he is a legit, well, they don't have any personal stake in the Shaun Alexander stuff. He was well before their time. So they'll probably not do that. But I know some Seahawks fans will. Some Seahawks fans do not like that guy.
No, he's got I've talked to him over the years, and I do like Shaun, so I'm not one of those guys that is a hater on him. I do think you got to take all those factors into account on his career when you look at him. But yeah, it's been odd, Garth, watching how the knives have come out, man. Like it's unfiltered. It's not. There's no like soft shoe stuff going on here. It's just the players are letting with tweets and interviews and everything in between, just general vibe that there's definitely still some very much rancor going on there between a little bit of the former to the, and I'd love to believe it's all just them coming to Carroll's defense here, where they feel like Carroll, their most celebrated ball coach, is getting hammered because of this, but I think it's also a little bit more of there's definitely some personal stuff here going on.
Jason Tudor, thank you for the $5. I picked the score exactly last week. This week, not nearly as sure. I think the Niners run the ball too well. Niners 17, Seahawks 10. Might change, though. I do think it is going to be that kind of game. Low scoring, close, and it could go either way at the end. It would not shock me if we have a letdown game after that Broncos win, though. So I'm feeling you.
I like it, Jason. You're close to where I was with 2013. So, I think it really does come down to running the ball to me on both sides. If you can stop them running, and if you can run, I know it's very cliche to say that, but we're in the age of passing. To say that in a given game about that being a dictating factor in a game, I don't think is cliche. It's actually kind of an outlier versus what you might say in most games. But if we can stop them running, and if we can run the ball consistently, run more than we pass, I think this week, especially, that would lead us, to a run. Do you question off the back of this, Brendan, if let's say it is in a bit of a not full on monsoon, but let's call it just a downpour, does that favor one team or the other here?
Does it favor Geno because he's a veteran and Trey Lance is a little kid?
I'm just saying, or does it favor Seattle being that they've played in a lot of wet weather games and that maybe we're a little bit more theoretically designed to understand how we got to play those games?
Maybe. I guess I would say I think it favors us, but I haven't seen Geno play in the rain, right? Like we've seen Russ play in the rain, and we know he usually doesn't do well.
Yeah,
we haven't seen Geno.
Right.
We haven't seen Geno yet.
It'll be interesting. That's going to factor in, though. That could definitely change how this game's played. And we might, like I said, we might see 55 running attempts if it's a real big downpour and both coaches are just like, just run it. We can't throw. Let's just run.
You remember that Dolphins-Steelers game in 2007 where it was the monsoon? It had the punt where the ball went up and came down and it literally just got stuck in the turf.
Yeah.
Like it didn't bounce. Yeah. Like let's bring that back. Like everybody loves it.
It's fun watching those games. It's like snow games, man. It's awesome when it's the elements are just ridiculous and nobody can keep their feet. And I know some people don't like it, but I think I kind of like that about football, that rains, sunshine, snow, whatever it is, the conditions outside of lightning, we're going to play.
283, thank you for the $4.99. Imagine the Seahawks make the playoffs and Geno gets an MVP vote. I'm not worried about that scenario, but I am prepared for the scenario where, imagine if Geno takes us to the playoffs the year after Russell didn't. That alone.
With a lot of rookies and young players and no Bobby Wagner.
The Snail, thank you for the $2. Brian Blades for MVP. I think that's a great note to start winding the stream down on.
Well, Brian was a good player, man. He was a possession guy back in the day, and certainly having Largent take all that heat off him to begin his career helped him start out really hot. It's a good player for us.
I mostly know Brian from Tecmo Bowl because the Seahawks were terrible in Tecmo Bowl, but Brian Blades was the number one receiver. He was probably the best player on that team. It was not a good Tecmo Bowl team. We did not have anybody who was like the unstoppable dude. Like we didn't have Lawrence Taylor or Jerry Rice. Jackson. Yeah, no Bo, no Randall Cunningham.
Bo was ridiculous on that game. Yeah. Bo was just
Bo
absurd.
Was the most broken.
That was the most OP character in video game. One of the most OP characters in video game history was Bo Jackson in the original Tecmo Bowl.
Yeah, the Niners had a play that was literally unstoppable. If the defense ran the counter to that play, you could still just hit a slant for 10 yards every time for free. Like
Oh,
there was
wow.
something wrong with the programming to where the play that was supposed to be the perfect counter
Yeah.
would actually not counter it because they didn't think it all the way through. That's an example of a game where like the gameplay is bad, but it still works. Like you still get something out of it, even though it's not a well programmed game, really.
No, and it was 91, so it was like the beginning of them. I mean, they were in such a rudimentary state as far as putting those kind of video games together. It was a huge leap forward, but it was a little bit like it was like that basketball game you used to play where you get on fire and it was 2 guys on 2, right? And they would take the
Yeah,
2,
NBA Jam.
NBA Jam. It was like that. It was like it was just really fun to play. And man, when you called the right play, and it was like it was a jailbreak, right? Like you just had
Right.
guys like running into your quarterback, like, okay, I guess that play's done. So it had simplicity to it, but it was a fun game. Then it got better through the years when they got to more of like a Madden-ish looking thing.
Right.
Football wasn't bad when they got to that stage a few years later. Madden overtook them eventually because they lost the rights, but
Yeah, and Madden also was doing 11 on 11. I remember Madden was adamant about that because
yeah.
they wanted to do 7 on 7 at first, and Madden was like, "No, this is going to be as much of a simulation as we can make it."
Yeah. Smart on him to do it. You know,
Mhm.
they got away from it as years went along, simulation, but at least that was where they were originally starting from.
Mhm. Jeffrey, thank you for the $5. It makes you wonder what kind of prospect Trey Lance would have been with 4 full years of college experience. Huh. That is an interesting one. I remember reading a lot of articles back in the day wondering about Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. Tim Duncan had 4 years of college. KG was straight out of high school.
Mhm.
Was the reason why Tim Duncan was a better player and had a better career because he built those reps in college? Like that was kind of the interesting debate at the time. I guess this is kind of another version of that.
I could see that. I don't have a good answer on it myself. It's just something to contemplate a little bit as much as anything because, there's a part to me that goes, if I'm in the position of Trey Lance there, even if I know it's going to take me that time to develop, I'm getting to the NFL level to start that clock ticking on to when I can get my next contract extension. I don't want to hold off on that time period. Though it could provide me some more added benefit to my development as far as that it's harder to develop maybe when you're under the scrutiny and microscope of the pro level, especially when you're on a team that feels like they're in their window right now. I think that's the tough thing for Lance here is that he just didn't maybe go to the right team to give him that patience to let him then grow and get to that spot. Instead, he went to the team that was like, clock's ticking, my man. Clock's ticking. Let's go. And
Yeah. He went number 3 overall. He has no regrets about coming out, I'm sure.
No. And that's, I can't, for him, I would not have advised him not to do that if he was going to be the 3rd overall pick. Get the clock going, get going. And if his Niners are going to make that mistake is to think that they're getting a guy that's more pro ready than he really is, that's their mistake, not yours. And Lance will eventually turn into that guy. I think it may take him a couple years to get there, but that's not if he becomes awesome at 24 years old, 2 years down from now, okay, so now he's only going to have a 14-year career of greatness ahead of him here as he's this guy now. So, and we don't know for sure he'll get there, but I just keep coming back to like, if that's the fact of the matter for me, if I'm that quarterback, then I'll get out early and go. I don't think me being in college, especially playing against that level of competition he was at Dakota, like South Dakota State. I mean, it's not like he was going to get tested. He had like 43 touchdowns, 0 interceptions the year before. So how much is there to be learned by just going out there and, taking every team out to the woodshed every week? They're not even challenging you, which was a little bit like that last year that he played.
Yeah, it's a very valid point. I guess you could transfer, but not everybody can.
Yeah,
can't you just transfer to Oklahoma and let their system like pad your stats for a year?
he could have done that. They don't have to wait out a year like they used to on that. So he
Mhm.
definitely could have gone that as another direction with it too.
Okay, so I think Justin Herbert broke his rib by the way. So
Ooh.
yeah, it doesn't sound like it was very good, but yeah, that was a good show. We pretty much unpacked everything there is to unpack about the 49ers. So thank you, Brandon, for coming out.
My pleasure,
Thank
man.
you, everybody in the chat. We built up over 220 people. I think we are currently sitting at about 220. We will be doing this again next week after the game to break it apart. I think we're going on Tuesday, this channel.
Mhm.
And then we're on to the Dirty Birds in Atlanta.
Ooh.
Well, in Seattle, but they're coming from Atlanta.
We got Dirty Birds in our stadium.
Yes.
Not us birds, the other birds.
Correct. All right. So we'll see what happens. Let's try to get to 2-0. Let's see if we can get this season off on a good roll. But either way, whatever happens, we will be back next week. And especially on a week like this, you got to say, before you tune out, you got to say it, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.